So people have often heard of the gut microbiome, which is now a really big field of study. So likewise, there is a skin microbiome, and this is made up of literally trillions of bacteria in a perfect balance, and they help protect your skin from all sorts of things. It's a big field of research that's really only been going on for about the last 10 years. And in fact, the same classes of chemicals are in skincare as are in ultra-processed food.
It's an interesting parallel. It really is.
Really interesting parallel. And people now, I think, are waking up to looking at the ingredients in processed food.
Yes.
The ingredients are there on the back of skincare bottles. Read them for yourselves.
We often forget that skin is the largest organ of the body, and therefore one of the most important. It keeps everything that should be in, and helps keep the rest of the world out. But when skin is sore or inflamed, as Julie and her daughter Neve experienced due to eczema, it affects how you move, feel and function every day. In this episode, Julie Macken, founder of Neve's Bees, shares her journey from pharmaceutical marketing to wildflower meadows and natural skincare. We explore how natural ingredients and caring for the body's outer layer plays an important role in whole body health. We look into the reality of some skincare claims and highlight what the skin needs, as well as what it doesn't. This conversation reminds us that skincare isn't just a beauty ritual, and it doesn't just support how our skin feels. It's a key part of living well, our general health, and ultimately the environment and the world around us. So today I have Julie Macken here, who is a local friend from Oxfordshire. We met through various independent Oxford group and a marketing group, and we sort of bonded over the love of cold water swimming and various things. And we've known each other for a few years now. Julie Macken is someone I really wanted to get on the podcast because she has a really different take on the way that we see skincare. And I really learned so much from Julie in even just the short preparation conversation for this episode. And I am so excited to share lots of interesting viewpoints on thinking about our skin. And you may say, why are we talking about skin on the Make Movement Matter podcast? But I think it's a crucial part. It's one of the most crucial organs that we tend to forget a lot about. And yet we look after ourselves. And clearly, if you're listening to this, you are thinking about looking after your body because you are interested in movement. But there's so many facets to that. And obviously, if we want to move well, we need to feel good in all our body, including our skin. So welcome, Julie. And I'd love it if you would start by giving us a bit of going back to basics about what our skin actually does. This, what I believe is the biggest organ in the body. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, I believe it is. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Hi, Wendy. Delighted to be on your podcast today. So thank you for inviting me.
Pleasure.
Yeah, I think oftentimes the media will have us believe that skin is just something that happens on our face and is something that we must polish to within an inch of its life, scrub it all off and then make it look glassy, which I challenge. So let's go back to what the purpose of your skin is. So skin basically, as you say, is the body's largest organ, and it has three main roles. One is to make sure it regulates our temperature, so can keep us warm and can cool us down by sweating. The other is it's an excretory organ, so it helps your body to get rid of waste and things that it doesn't need within it. But then the other one, and this is the one that we'll focus on today, is it's a barrier. It stops stuff that you don't want going in your body, so pollutants, bacteria, viruses, UV from coming in, and it stops water basically from evaporating. So when people, say my skin looks dehydrated, what they actually mean is that the water has evaporated from within them. And one of therefore the key functions of our skin is its barrier properties. So that's stopping stuff coming in and stopping stuff going out. So it might be worth if I go in a little bit more detail about what makes the skin barrier, because I think people don't often think about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that.
I'll try and keep it sort of fairly top level, but basically there's a few levels, there's a few bits that make your skin have a healthy skin barrier. So your skin is actually made up of the dermis, which is beneath, and then the epidermis, which is on the top. And that epidermis is different layers of cells. They're called squamous epithelium, if anyone's interested. And they have keratin in them. And as they grow closer to the surface, they die off, and those keratin scales stay on the surface, and keratin is waterproof. So they help to keep your skin waterproof initially. They naturally slough off. So as the skin grows up, those cells on the top will slough off, and they remove sort of bacteria and viruses as they go. But they keep us waterproof. So that's one layer. Then the next layer is natural sebum, which is oil, your skin's natural
Yes.
oil.
A word that we've probably heard quite a bit. Yes.
Yeah, and that's good stuff. It's you need it there. It's like the wax on a wax coat, if you like. And it also has the perfect pH to help your skin be healthy. So that's the acidity or base, keeps it at the right pH. And then we also have what's called a microbiome. So people have often heard of the gut microbiome, which is now a really big field of study. So likewise, there is a skin microbiome, and this is made up of literally trillions of bacteria in a perfect balance, and they help protect your skin from all sorts of things. It's a big field of research that's really only been going on for about the last 10 years. So those three things, having a good keratin layer, that's kind of a physical barrier, having this waterproofing sebum, and then having this healthy microbiome, so good and bad bacteria in perfect balance, are helping your skin to not dehydrate and not have all these pollutants and bacteria and viruses getting in. So hopefully that's a sort of fairly concise summary.
No, it is, and it's really fascinating. And I think the one that stands out for me is the microbiome angle, that before you had said it, especially when we were speaking before, I had no idea, literally had never heard that. And I would imagine a lot of people haven't. But actually, so the research into the gut microbiome and understanding the importance of that is really beneficial, because it's the same thing. It's just in a different place, in a sense. It's not exactly the same, but it works in the same way. So that's really useful for people to then understand, myself included, what that's all about. So it's a really important regulatory organ as well. And we need to come back to the fact that it's an organ, and therefore it's another part of our entire system that needs to be in balance, beautifully, perfectly in balance, in homeostasis, so that the whole organ of our being can work well. So what other factors that are not necessarily connected to the skin affect the skin? For example, the way we move and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. So your skin has a blood supply in the dermis. And people kind of know that if you do a lot of exercise and the blood comes to the surface, or if you're hot, you go pink, right? And actually having a healthy blood supply to the dermis is really important, because you need to get all the nutrients to the skin. And actually in the dermis is where sits the collagen and the elastin that people are always talking about. And just as an aside, we'll probably talk about this later, but people look at rubbing something on the outside to get to the collagen beneath it, and to be honest, most of the stuff you're rubbing on gets nowhere near it. If you want to help the collagen, get the body moving, get the blood and all the good protein and nutrients and minerals that you're hopefully eating, get them to the skin. So activity, most definitely. And we're not just talking about skin on our face either. This is a fairly small bit. We're talking about the skin on your whole body. So obviously movement, having a good, nutritious, healthy diet, and I know that you've had other people talking about this on your podcast, and being sufficiently hydrated, not overhydrated. Actually, that's
and exactly. So drill down into that a little bit, because 2 liters a day. When should I drink it? What does it mean? Only drinking when I feel thirsty is too late. What does it mean?
There are probably people, just as a caveat, there are probably people that are more expert at this. But if you go back to the original research that we need, I think it's something like 1.9 litres a day. If you look at all the body systems and how much water each of those chemical reactions takes without doing any exercise, it's about 1.7, 1.8 litres a day of fluid. So it doesn't just have to be water.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're doing more exercise, you need it, but it's a pure chemical reaction. You know, you need to make sure that the water in is being balanced by
Yes.
what your body needs. And actually, there is some research now that suggests that being over drinking too much water is actually probably more damaging than being dehydrated. It's rare to be dehydrated because then you're just diluting all your
Yeah.
bodily systems, and
Right.
then you're not as well able to get all the nutrients that you need out of the food that you're eating. So I think it's a bit of a myth, drinking 5 litres a day is good for you.
No.
I don't think it is. So
Yeah. No, I think you have to be very active to have those high levels. Absolutely. And again, I think, as I've said lots of times on here, it's responding to how your body is feeling and knowing what makes you feel good. And I think signs, particularly with hydration, in terms of your brain, whether when you're or if your body is feeling sluggish, it's not necessarily needing food. It can often be needing water just for
yeah,
that sort of hydration, that little pep up. So
yeah, yeah.
trying to work out what your body is telling you is so key. And actually, we've had Caroline Williams on the podcast at the end of the last series talking about interoception. So that sense of working out what your body needs and what it's telling you. So if anyone wants to listen to that, pop back a few episodes after you've listened to this one, of course. So we talked about movement, we talked about hydration, nutrition. What about stress? Does that affect the skin?
Yeah, for sure. And again, there are there's all sorts of research papers on this. Um, Stress has so many impacts. The various sort of cortisol can stress the skin. I read something the other day that cortisol, which is one of the stress hormones, actually can break down collagen within the skin. So that's a pretty
Okay.
direct impact. And then obviously, like, being stressed affects sleep, and the old
Yeah.
myth you need your beauty sleep isn't, that's true. We do need to have
Yes.
7 or 8 hours sleep a night. um and all the old things that perhaps your granny used to tell you are true. To look after your whole body, your skin being part of it. So yeah,
Yeah.
having being under stress is definitely going to impact on your skin as well, and whatever you rub into it. You
Yeah,
should
exactly.
look
And
at
we will get on.
the causes,
Sorry.
not look at the
Yes.
causes, not the symptoms.
Yes, exactly. And we're and being outdoors is another factor, but we're going to come onto that in a different context a little bit later. So, tell me a little bit about why you got into this, because you were not in the skincare world, were you originally?
No, I wasn't. Although, ironically, my mother was. My mother used to sell,
Really?
the cosmetics behind the counter. And actually, she used to sell these fancy, I think it was Helena Rubinstein, and then many years ago, and then Elizabeth Arden. And funnily
Oh
enough,
yes.
she used to come home and just put evening primrose on her skin.
Oh,
not,
so she
not,
was selling one thing and doing another. Oh, funny.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
interesting.
And actually, she looks amazing for her age now and is healthy. Anyway, that's another point. So no, I had worked for many years in pharmaceutical marketing, basically, or pharmaceutical and over-the-counter marketing. So selling the sort of things that you would buy in Boots. So some of the Piriton and Nitol and Settlers, and
Mm.
some of these sort of, and cough medicines and that kind of stuff. But was quite aware of some of the claims that perhaps get made on healthcare products. And I'm probably naturally quite a cynical person, but it was fairly apparent that much of the blurb that's said about things is based on, oftentimes, let's say, slightly spurious claims. Anyway, I was in the sort of corporate world for quite a long time, and worked out it wasn't for me. And then, for various reasons, ended up having bees and playing around with those products. And both Neve and I suffered from, Neve's my daughter, suffered from dry skin and eczema. And one of the roles I had was actually brand manager of a brand called Cetrabem, which is one of the big eczema products. And so we had it for free. But it really wasn't working for us. And so I started doing a bit more research. And I can go into this now if you want, about the sort of why we started going down the route that we did.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm a chemist by background. That was my first qualification, and I started getting quite interested in the sort of products initially on the sort of eczema shelves in the supermarkets and the chemist drugstores, and then the sort of wider products. And I had a bit of a sort of penny drop moment, and I'd invite any of your listeners to do the same. And I think, Wendy, when you and I had this conversation, this was a bit of a, oh, when you look at the
Yes.
ingredients of skincare products, the first one is normally aqua, water. And actually, the chemistry of it is that anywhere between 50 and 90% of all skin creams and lotions is water. And in fact, the definition of a cream and a lotion is an emulsion of oil and water. That's the definition. And water has only been added in skincare products for about the last 100 years. And I don't know if any of your older listeners might remember, or perhaps some of your parents or grandparents or whatever. There was a product called Cold Cream, Pond's Cold Cream. You remember that? I had some when I
I
was a
do. Yeah.
and
Very thick, gloopy stuff.
yeah, thick gloopy stuff. And it's basically petroleum jelly, water, and chemicals. I'll go into what the chemicals are. But it's called cold cream because when you rub it on, the water evaporates and leaves your skin feeling cold. So even the people that made it knew that water is just evaporating. And then a bit later on, a product called Vanishing Cream, again, some of you may have heard of, came along. And why is it called Vanishing Cream? Because funnily enough, it vanishes because it's got like vanishing cream is lotion. That's what it is. It's about 80 or 90% water, and that water is just evaporating. It's vanishing. So you don't need this water.
That's what I was going to ask. So is it there for a good reason?
So there is some research that suggests that a small amount of water can penetrate into the first 1 or 2 layers of skin cells, pretty much the dead skin cells. But it's the same amount as if you left your skin slightly damp. So your skin is basically waterproof. Otherwise, you'd sit in the bath and you'd blow up like a Teletubby in the end. So basically, your skin is waterproof. That's the whole point of your skin. It's trying to stop you from dehydrating. That's what the barrier is for. So it was mainly added because moisturizers are oils and waxes. That's the definition. A moisturizer is a substance that helps protect your skin's natural barrier. That is the definition of a moisturizer. You can go and Google it. People don't really think about it, but that is what a moisturizer is.
And when you say helps protect, what does that mean?
So moisturizers, really good question. Moisturizers have 3 different components. There are 3 different types of moisturizer. There is emollients, occlusives, and humectants, and they all have a different role. So emollients penetrate ever so slightly into the first few layers of skin and basically They're like the mortar, they block up any gaps. So we're not talking about pores here. Pores are very different things. We're talking about the intracellular bits in your keratin, in your skin cells. So the emollients go up and sort of block any holes, and like when you put wax on your wax jacket, they're basically, helping that. Then the humectants, they draw water in. So things like beeswax is a humectant, hyaluronic acid, which is something that some people may have heard of, glycerin, they're all humectants.
Yep.
And then occlusives are things that put a protective layer. So they're like the last layer of polish on your jacket or whatever. And they tend to be sort of thicker things. So again, beeswax is an occlusive, petroleum jelly is an occlusive, tallow is an occlusive. So a balance of all those three different types of moisturizer is a really perfect blend. Emollients, the first one, most oils, so most plant oils are emollients,
Okay.
and mineral oil, so paraffin oil is also an emollient. Some people like that, some people don't, but technically it is an emollient as well. So the water is added basically to make the moisturizers easier to spread. You'd have the same
Right.
effect if you left your skin slightly damp.
A little bit damp, of course.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really
Yeah.
all you need. Um, so most, I'm going to put it in inverted commas, moisturizers are mainly water. Now, there is nothing wrong in putting water on your face, obviously. It's a bit pointless, but there's nothing wrong with it. However, and this is where I think I would really love people to start doing a little bit of research, like read the back of the bottle.
Mm.
As soon as you add water to a skincare product, you have to add a few different classes of processing chemicals. Now, in natural skincare or organic skincare, those chemicals will be synthesized from a natural source, but they are still the same. They're still doing the same thing. They're probably less damaging to the environment than the synthetic ones, but they're still synthesized from anyway. So those chemicals are something called emulsifiers, and an
Which
emulsifier, yeah,
which we've heard from food a lot
yes,
of the time. Yeah.
exactly. And in fact, the same classes of chemicals are in skincare as are in ultra processed food. And this is, if
It's
I
an
was
interesting parallel. It really is.
really interesting parallel, and people now, I think, are waking up to looking at the ingredients in processed food.
Yes.
The ingredients are there on the back of skincare bottles. Read them for yourselves. If you can't understand what they are, then you can. I've written a decoder. I'm happy to give it to you, Wendy, if you want to put it on your site.
So
But it,
useful, yes.
yeah, and you can just check it. But so emulsifiers are a class of chemicals that stick oil and water together, basically. Because if you make your skin cream and you've got, let's say, 60% water and maybe 20% moisturizer, so an oil, you think when you make salad dressing with oil and vinegar,
Yeah.
they don't
Separates.
mix. That's what your cream would look
Yeah.
like. So you put a chemical called an emulsifier in that basically sticks them together. Fairy liquid or washing up liquid is an emulsifier. It sticks to the oil on your plates, and then the water washes it off, so your plates aren't greasy anymore. Problem is, you're putting that on your skin, and that emulsifier sits on your skin and emulsifies your natural sebum that we've talked about making you waterproof. So it actually compromises your skin's barrier. And I've even seen some marketing blurbs say the emulsifier in our cream helps to make your barrier damage so that things can penetrate. And I'm like, no, that's just
The
wrong.
opposite. Yeah.
It's nonsense. Anyway, so emulsifiers. Then you also have a class, and by the way, emulsifiers, they're often like 10 to 15% if you're formulating it. So they're often that you'll see something called cetearyl alcohol. That's an emulsifier. So they're normally
And
pretty
and
high.
and what we're saying is that there is no benefit to these, and potentially they are damaging because they are not good. They're not needed by the skin, and they may also be not good for the skin. Is that right?
Correct. They might feel nice. So sometimes if you look, cetyl alcohol, it'll say it's a softening, a smoothing agent or something. So they feel nice when you rub them in. They can feel nice, but they're not a moisturizer and they're not doing anything beneficial for the skin. So they might not be harming it. Well, they might be compromising the skin's barrier, if I'm honest, but they're not needed. And they're being shipped around the world when you don't need them to me.
Exactly. So you're paying sometimes very large amounts of money for water and these other things that are potentially doing you no good or even doing you some harm, and you're paying a lot for that. And as you say, that's being transported around the planet. Just taking a quick pause because I want to tell you about a new offer exclusively for listeners of this podcast. If you'd like to improve your mobility, strength, and learn more about moving well in daily life now and to train for your 90s, come and move with me in the Reclaim Movement membership. There's weekly live coaching in term time with hundreds of replays available, as well as hordes of 5 and 10-minute mini movement videos to follow throughout your day. I'm offering you a 15% discount on your first month's membership on top of the 7-day free trial. Go to reclaimmovement.co.uk/membership to create your account and quote the code podcast15. Let's move together to feel better and keep doing all the things you love.
And then the second class of chemicals, this is the one that I personally have the biggest bugbear against, is preservatives or biocides. Pretty much that's synonymous. And they're all, because bugs, bacteria can grow in water. When you add water to a skincare product, you have to, the regulators, certainly in the UK, I'm sure it's the same in other countries, won't let you sell that product without a preservative system. So basically, those preservatives are biocides. They're there to kill bacteria. And there is increasing evidence now to show that they also are knocking back your skin's commensurate bacteria, these microbiome that we talked about. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, some people are aware of, like parabens. You'll see parabens. That is one of these preservatives that is really quite harmful. And not only is it harmful on the microbiome, but I understand it's a small enough molecule that actually gets into your bloodstream, that one. So that has all sorts of nasty connotations. So that one really is a no-no. However, even some of the ones like phenoxy alcohol is one that you'll see in quite a lot of natural products. It's just an alcohol, really. But it is killing some bacteria. So it will... the research is showing that it is starting to show that it is knocking back your skin's natural microbiome. And the big thing is you don't need it. I often liken it to so people might, if you leave a cup of coffee, so if I left this lovely cup of black coffee sitting around in a few days, it would be growing all sorts of ick. That's what your skincare would look like without the preservatives. So you need them, but you don't need them because you don't need the water in the first place. Whereas if you were to leave some oil around, so you might have some olive oil or some cooking oil or something in your cupboard, you can leave it there for a couple of years. Eventually it'll oxidize, but it's not going to go. You don't need to put preservatives in oil-based products because the bugs, typically don't grow there.
So there's an awful lot in that, but the general sense there is that we need to be questioning what we're putting on our skin because it can have adverse effects, or we're just basically wasting our money. Before we got onto the what you should or what's good for your skin, so the more positive side, which is obviously partly the products you sell, but you also have sort of other natural, easy alternatives and so on that I know you're happy to talk about. Let's just do a few myth debunking phrases, because just like with food, there are so many, and to be honest, the fitness industry, quite frankly, there's an awful lot that really bugs me about what's said. The big sort of hooking lines that people are drawn into because they sound like they're going to make big change. They overpromise, but then leave people financially strapped, quite frankly, and probably not very different. Um, it's worth going into a few of those. So if you could just give us a selection of a few that probably are the ones that people have heard the most, I think that'd be really useful. Not with the point of, saying don't buy this product or that product, but more be informed to question whether that is right for you. I
Yeah.
think is the best angle to go, whether you choose to believe in that thing.
Yeah.
And then we'll go on to, well, what can you do about it for yourself to really benefit your skin? And then I can talk about what I'm using on my skin now.
Okay, so I think one of the my real bugbears is the whole anti-aging thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, because,
yeah,
well, to start with, surely it's a privilege to have got to the age. I know you and I are a similar age. Like,
100%. Yeah.
it's a privilege to get to this age, and um, I find it okay. I understand that some people might feel more confident if perhaps they felt like they looked like they did 20 years ago. Um, And wouldn't it be lovely if we could feel the confidence to be happy to look like we do? I mean, I'm challenging big picture stuff here, so perhaps you need a
Quite
psychologist to go
frankly,
into this.
but
But
quite frankly, a
it
lot
really
of the
annoys
time.
me.
But if you go back 20 years, did you really love the way you looked then?
Yeah,
A lot
exactly.
of the, in all honesty, most of us are not, a bit sort of self-deprecating throughout our whole lives. We always talk about that in terms of the shapes of our bodies and things like that. Oh, if only we knew what we had when we were young, all this kind of narrative. And yet at the time, perhaps our confidence meant that we didn't feel that way either.
Yeah.
It's all about this, isn't it? It's all about how we sorry, I'm pointing to my head for listeners. It's all about how we see ourselves, but
Yeah.
it's so much more than the vehicle that we're in.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
more
Absolutely.
about how we see ourselves as a person. And I think the what you say about the privilege of aging
Yeah.
is bang on, because there's an awful lot of people who don't get to this, to not that we're like so old, but don't even get to middle age, or
Yeah.
get to middle age and perhaps won't be living for much longer. There's and we've all lost people in our lives. So I think you're
And I
absolutely
think
right. It is a
it's
privilege.
reframing it as well, from not, oh my God, there's a wrinkle, to, wow, my skin enables me to jump in a lake, to feel the wind on my face, to go outside and feel the sun when I take the dog for a walk, and I can move. Look, my hands move, my arms move, my
Exactly.
legs move. They don't hurt. They're not itchy anymore. Um, they
Yes.
don't split when I try and stretch them. My skin is supple and healthy, and it feels nice, and it enables me to do what I want to do. And that, I think, is, golly, really so much more important than this silly narrative about, having a wrinkle is really, really the worst thing in the world, because it just isn't.
And from the perspective of actual products and those claims,
Ugh.
do you think any of them stand up scientifically? Because so many times that word science is used. Now, you're a chemist
Mm.
originally. This
Yeah.
is your area. And people who are non-scientists like me, and there's a lot of podcasts, I love to have people on who've got scientific backgrounds. But that shouldn't be the sort of panacea where if it's scientific, we believe it. Because there's so
Yeah.
many, we know that, for example, with ultra processed food, we know that lots of the research studies into certain foods are funded by the very people who are trying to sell the products and so on.
Mm.
So there's an awful lot of misinformation. So what's your
There is
take
lots
on
of
that?
legend. That, just a little story on that. So, um, I'd written a quite a nice press release, just basically laying out the basics on, you know, these are the ingredients in skin creams. It's water, it's emulsifier, it's preservatives. And the science editor of one of the mainstream newspapers in the UK, um, she picked it up and she said, "You do know, don't you, that none of the mainstream magazines are going to pick this up because they're paid for by the very people that are selling the water and the petrol." I was like, okay, that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that one. But that really brought it
That's
home for
sad.
me. It is
Yeah,
quite sad, isn't it? I mean, I
it
think
is.
So I should say that there are some products that are going to be better and worse than others, and
Yeah.
you know, I don't. My role is not to sort of scaremonger people, and I don't want people thinking that they're doing themselves untold damage. I think what I would like people to come away with and thinking, actually, there's probably things that they could be doing that would cost them less and be less damaging to the environment and less damaging to their skins. And if you start reading the ingredients, you might see that. And the other thing is that placebo effect is really powerful.
Yeah.
However, there are some sort of quite good things I think to look out for. So number one, there are some products that are ludicrously expensive. There's this one product, and I won't mention the brand name in case they sue me or whatever.
Please don't.
But it costs £250 for in UK pounds for a pot that's, I think it's 30 mil, so a standard sort of face cream. The ingredients
Whoa.
are aqua, so water, dimethicone, which is I think it's an emulsifier, but it's really bad for marine life. So when it washes off your skin, it's really bad for marine life. Then Helianthus annus, which is sunflower oil, and then a few preservatives and a couple of quite nice plant oils, but probably 75% of it is water, sunflower oil, and dimethicone. And
Wow.
it's £250. So you know what? If you were going to buy that one, I would say to you, go to your local upmarket
Go and get some
supermarket.
sunflower oil.
Get some sunflower oil. You can get a lovely organic sunflower oil.
Yeah.
Probably about 50p. So yeah, that's it. Then the other thing that I think is quite an interesting one, if you go back to the principle that your skin is a barrier, a moisturizer is there to help protect that barrier. Our grannies used to use Vaseline. I personally don't like Vaseline, but many dermatologists will tell you that that is the best thing that you can put on your skin because it is just pure petroleum jelly. There
Petroleum
isn't
jelly,
any
yeah.
of these, and petroleum jelly is a moisturizer.
Okay.
So our grannies probably knew a thing or two, or they were using tallow or a beeswax balm, which is obviously what we're doing. The other thing I think
Tallow being
tallow is beef fat.
fat. Yeah,
beef fat. I personally don't like it. There is a beautiful brand in this country, I'm sure it's the same in other countries, that make skincare using tallow.
Okay.
This is how it was all. Beeswax or tallow or lanolin was always how skincare was made for millennia. But then there's a whole nother industry at the moment on skincare actives. So you see like a retinol cream or a
Yes.
vitamin C serum or a peptide serum or what have you.
Which are
And
all buzzwords. They're all buzzwords
they are,
but again, in other spheres, not necessarily in skincare. So it's that jumping on the bandwagon of knowledge, potentially somebody, oh, vitamin C, it's really, really good. Peptides, they're an up and coming thing that we all should know about. Yeah, very interesting.
So there's a lot of myths that can be busted there. I mean, just sort of a few very basic ones. So knowing the principle, your skin is a barrier. Most molecules do not penetrate the skin's barrier. Those that do are typically drugs. So we have things like, some of your listeners might be on HRT patches or other hormone patches or nicotine patches. So obviously, you are putting those on, and that drug is penetrating through the epidermis, through the dermis, getting into the bloodstream, and therefore delivering systemic impacts on your body. And that is, I understand, the problem with parabens is they're doing just that. So they are able to penetrate the body. Not many molecules can penetrate the body. Most of the marketing bump that you see on these actives kind of implies that it is penetrating and getting into the body, but they kind of wash over and then what's it doing when it gets into your organs? Most actually are not penetrating, which is great because it means that they're therefore not doing us any systemic damage, but it kind of questions what's the point.
What are they doing?
So vitamin C, its impacts are topical. So some will say, oh, it's penetrating through the skin. it basically doesn't. There was some research done a while ago that completely dispelled that myth. And if you want vitamin C in your body, eat a bit of
That's it.
broccoli or an orange. Um, so vitamin C, what vitamin C is doing is it's called an antioxidant. So like if you put lemon juice on an apple, it stops it
Yeah.
going brown because it's mopping up the free radicals. Most plant oils will do that as well. So if you've got a skin cream with your sunflower oil or your jojoba oil or something, or vitamin E is one that you'll see in a lot of skin cream.
Yeah.
That actually is an antioxidant. So that's kind of doing the same thing. But vitamin C serum, I mean, most of it is going to denature before it gets anywhere near your skin anyway, so it's a bit pointless, but it's probably not harmful. Peptides is another one, and peptides are a protein molecule. They're basically they're a building block of a protein molecule.
Mm.
They're really big molecules. They can't penetrate the skin. There are some that are now synthesized nanopeptides that supposedly can penetrate the skin, but they're just protein. Just like eat more protein in your diet. It's like, I don't know, or stick a steak on the outside of your skin. Maybe that will have the same impact. I just think it's a bit silly. I just don't get the science behind it.
And that comes back to the start of the conversation. We're saying what else affects the skin, and so what you eat and drinking, staying hydrated, and so on. You're kind of then benefiting the skin from the inside in that
Yeah,
sense, aren't you? So
absolutely.
do it that way. Think about it that
And
way.
also, it's going to I'm just holding up my hands. It's going to your hands and your
Yes,
stomach and your
not
back and
just
your
where you
legs.
put some cream. Yeah.
Exactly. And your skin is a barrier all over. You want your whole skin to be healthy. You want
Yes.
the elastin and the collagen to be healthy on your whole body. You want your whole body to be
Mm.
waterproof and to have the right nutrients, not just
Yeah.
on your
Yeah.
face. Um,
Yeah, I mean, they're really good points. And it is sad, but it's also, that's why we have these conversations. It's about awareness. It's about understanding that you have choice always. And that if you just inform yourself to a certain extent, then you can make the right choices. So let's move on to some right choices. What are the kind of things that you think are really good? And let's talk about the sort of myths within that as well. I'd love you to talk about how to moisturize what can really be a beneficial
yeah,
moisturizer.
yeah.
Talk a little bit about how that works in your world at Neves Bees, and alternatives.
Yeah.
Also, another thing that we discussed before was about exfoliation. I thought that
Mm,
was a fascinating thing. So, and I'm sure people would love to hear about that, but also just about sort of, as well, a skincare routine. So maybe we start there, because there's also a lot of, you should do this, cleanse, tone, moisturize, or
yeah,
cleanse,
yeah,
tone,
yeah.
cleanse, tone, moisturize. And I remember as a youngster, you know, sort of going through that, and yeah, your skin felt different and better afterwards and so on. But it was temporary.
Yeah, absolutely, it was temporary.
It was
I think,
temporary, and it was more, and don't want to downplay the fact that actually spending time on yourself is a really good thing. So
mhm,
if you really love, for example, giving your foot a massage with some lovely moisturizer after a little foot spa, that time spent on yourself is beneficial in so many more ways than just what you're doing to the skin on your foot or the muscles in your foot.
yeah,
And I'm all for self-care and
yeah.
and treating yourself well and giving yourself time. But yeah, but what's the sort of reality?
So I think the first thing to say is your skin is really good at looking after itself. It's an amazingly designed organ that does what it does really well. Um, I think if we didn't have any pollution in the world, if we didn't put any makeup on our faces or we didn't get grime on our bodies, then we could just get away with washing ourselves with water. And I genuinely think that would
Yeah.
do us a power of good. And in fact, it was only about 100 years ago that it was probably Pond's, was it Pears or Pond soap, that started showing us having to lather ourselves and make us all foamy, and wash everything away. That probably that's where the problem started. So I, you mentioned specifically exfoliation. Now, going back to remembering what I said, that um, your skin has a protective layer, and the skin cells grow from the base layer, and they grow up and they grow up, and they gradually slough off as they get to the surface. And different areas have different thicknesses of skin. And normally our skin sort of naturally sloughs off as we do stuff with our hands, or we might wear clothes or whatever. And the reason why it's useful to have those skin cells coming off is that they do take away some of the sort of pollution and invading viruses and bacteria that are around. So it's helpful that they slough off. However, if you are scrubbing them off, with a really harsh exfoliator, or using some dreadful exfoliating chemical, sorry, don't get me started on that one, then you are not only removing that layer of protection, but you are also sloughing off the microbiome. And if you are using then a foaming cleanser, that is an emulsifier or a surfactant, then it is pulling away that layer of sebum as well. I think all you really need on your face is a gentle wipe with a cloth. Once a day, just wipe off any excess cells that haven't dropped off. Will come off with that. You don't need to be scrubbing them all off. So I think I actually think simpler is better. And then you see these 7-stage Korean skincare routines where you slough off all the protective layer, then you put a toner on it that strips the sebum off, then you double cleanse with a foaming cleanser and take even more of the sebum off. Then you put some moisturizer on, but you've also just put some preservatives on it that is killing your natural cells. Then you end up with a glassy skin that is so fragile that it's going to become dehydrated because it's got no barrier and start looking wrinkly really quickly. So a few hours later, your skin feels dry, so you need to put more on. It's a crazy circle.
See, when you do that, so if you are doing the very high maintenance, potentially damaging and certainly pulling away from what your skin naturally needs, which you're saying is very little, does that have an effect on the aging of your skin itself?
So one of the factors that leads to aging is dehydration. If your skin is dehydrated, then you will see more fine wrinkles. So keeping your skin hydrated with enough
Moisturized.
water and a moisturizer
Yeah.
is going to be as helpful as you can. Keeping that barrier. Remember, the skin barrier is the thing that is stopping you dehydrating, and the definition of a moisturizer is something that maintains and preserves your skin's barrier. This is really all we can do, and what we can do for our skin.
Yeah.
There is actually one other chemical that people will have heard of that I was going to mention earlier, which is retinol. I think a lot of
Yes.
your listeners will have heard of retinol. So retinol is a modern it's basically a component of vitamin A. So it naturally occurs, and many plant oils contain vitamin A. So you can get vitamin A from it. However, the industry has decided that they're going to synthesize it, and some of them now are so heavily synthesized that they're and isolated. So I think once you synthesize a molecule and you isolate it from the rest of it, it's no longer vitamin A, it's just that particular component of it. I worry about that one, to be honest, because
Okay.
that is one of the few molecules that now is being shown that it actually does penetrate the skin's barrier.
Okay.
And the way that it works is to stimulate the basal cells in the base layer of the epidermis to reproduce more quickly. So it does start to have an impact. It does start to show that you have fine wrinkles disappear because your skin cells are turning over so quickly. As soon as you stop using it, you go back to square one, and probably back further than that, because you've just been like overstimulating all the basal skin cells. My worry is that if it's penetrating the skin's barrier and potentially getting close to blood vessels, and its role is to overstimulate basal cells growth, and it might be getting into your bloodstream and your other organs, that just like that sets alarm bells ringing
Yeah.
with me. And
Yeah.
now I've noticed that some of the American skincare clinics have got warnings on their retinol creams that
Oh
say,
wow.
do not use if trying to become pregnant, because topical use causes congenital birth defects. I'm just like,
Oh
why,
my
people,
goodness.
why? And the EU has just banned, from
Oof.
June last year, the EU banned certain concentrations of certain retinol preparations.
Blimey.
Um,
Okay, that is really, really worth knowing then. So yeah, if that's something that concerns you or someone that you know that's using it around you, go do some reading, I'd say.
yeah,
Or
do some
send
reading.
them some reading.
Yeah,
Goodness me. Okay, so let's get on to what's good for your skin.
good for your skin. So,
So I just want to actually start here. So our conversation before, I went to Julie naively, saying, "Well, I think I use quite a good product, and it's really natural, and blah blah blah." And we had a little look at the ingredients, and yes, the first one was aqua, and there were quite a few good things in there, but there were a few things that were not necessarily going to be that great. But there was also an awful lot of things to support the water being there, as we've discussed. So then you gave me a little taster sample of, because I'm not into smelly stuff, so a sensitive skin, so no smell, sebum, daily sebum. And you said to me, apply this by having slightly damp skin, just as you would your normal moisturizer. And believe the difference. And do you know what? I'm quite cynical too, Julie. And I was like, yeah, we'll see.
good.
Even though I was so impressed by everything you'd said, the reality is, how does it feel for you on your skin? What does it feel like? And what I would say the difference is that when you use a normal moisturizer, if your skin's feeling dry because the water's evaporated after the shower, and you put on a moisturizer, it can start to feel tight before. So you put on a normal moisturizer, it does feel good for a few minutes and a little while. It doesn't potentially feel tight for most of the day in the way it can do. And perhaps there's obviously reasons why it's been feeling tight because you're using this product. I get that now. The difference with putting on this sebum, which is mainly from oils, is that all day you keep wanting to touch your skin because it feels sort of plumped up, and there's nothing tight or dry feeling. And I genuinely felt like it looked different. I was amazed, and that was day one. And so, haven't quite looked back. And that's not just to big up your product. It was more as a genuine test myself, because if I'm going to have you on my podcast, I want to be knowing what we're talking about as the alternative. So tell our listeners a little bit about sort of the formulations of that, but also generally your products, and also about the connection with the bees.
Okay, so brilliant. I'm so glad that worked for you. And actually, we are in terms of selling stuff, we only sell in the UK anyway. So I'm really not here for an upsell. I genuinely am
Oh.
on a bit of a mission to get people to just like stop putting all these chemicals in our skin and washing up. You and I both swim in rivers and lakes. I don't want these things in our rivers and lakes. They shouldn't be
Yeah.
there. But one of the things that is really easy for people to do is to, as you did, look on the ingredients of what you've bought. Ignore the water, ignore the chemicals, but just look at the stuff in there that they probably have highlighted in the marketing blurb. It probably says, oh, contains jojoba oil, or contains apricot kernel oil, or sunflower oil, or what have you. You can probably go and buy those oils by themselves without all the water, the chemicals, and the rest of the bump. And and use them on slightly damp skin, and you've got exactly the same product without all the rest of the stuff in there, which is
Yeah.
kind of like what I gave you was our sort of nice basic oil based serum product. And it contains all the nice stuff without any of the
Mm.
nasty stuff, so it's quite easy to do. There's one thing I want to say about oils as well in a second. Our range is basically made, so this is the sales bit. Our range is made to compete with the stuff you get in the high street without any of the chemicals and the other stuff that personally I don't think you need. So we have cleanser, which is an oil-based cleanser. So we use beeswax as part of that, which is a beautiful moisturizer. And then we have moisturizers and oils, and then we have products for hand and body as well. But one of the things that I think is really important is many people worry about putting oil on their skin because they're worried it'll block pores. That's a little bit of a myth, actually. There's this scale called the comedogenic rating scale, and it ranks oils and other substances as to whether they're likely to block pores or not. And it goes from 0 to 5, where I think 0 and 1 is it definitely won't. 2 is it really isn't gonna. 3, or be a bit careful. 4 might block your pores. 5, don't use it. And all of the oils that we use, and most of the ones that you'll see in products, are way down on the comedogenic scale. Interestingly, things like coconut oil are quite comedogenic, so they can block your pores. So unless you have sort of skin that really isn't prone to getting any kind of breakouts, I would avoid coconut oil on your skin. One of the oils that is lovely, we use a lot of it, and you'll see it in many products, is an oil called jojoba. It's spelled jojoba.
Yes,
And
I've always called it the wrong. I've pronounced it wrong until you told me.
but that molecularly is really similar to the skin's own sebum. So it's one of the
Right.
closest oils that's so that's a really lovely one. Lovely one to use.
Lovely. Amazing. And yeah, so if you're interested, if you're in the UK, pop over to Neavesby's. We'll obviously be putting it in the show notes. And also you go to quite a few of festivals in the summer and Christmas markets and things like that. So you may see her around. And just to finish off, I'd love it if you talked just for a couple of minutes about the sort of the effects on nature, because
Yeah.
we've all got a huge responsibility. We keep talking about global warming, what's going to happen for our kids. And this may not seem like a big win in the sense of getting industries to stop pumping out harmful things into the environment and so on. But it's so important, isn't it, for our waterways?
Oh
Um,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
and you're really passionate about that, and that's a big part of you use your platform, and it's on your website as well. You sort of invest in that, don't you, as well? So tell us a
So
little bit about that.
this is some scary stats, but in the UK, it might be similar in other countries. I think the UK is particularly bad. We have lost 97% of our wildflower meadows and half of all our hedges. And
Wow.
one of the reasons why pollinators, so bees, moths, butterflies,
Yep.
etc., are struggling, and they really are struggling, is because of lack of forage. That's things that they eat and places they can shelter. So things like trees, hedges, wildflower meadows, etc. So our mission from the outset, from running this business, has been to do what we can to bring that back. So we
Yeah.
donate 10% of our profits to nature recovery charities. We give away packs of wildflower seeds, so each one makes a little mini meadow.
Lovely.
I call them bee service stations. And then we've also planted our own. We've got a 6-acre wildflower meadow just outside here, which we have planted and we look after. And it's amazing in the summer and the spring. It's just starting to come out now. You can see like the bees just all over it, and you walk through it and the moths come out and the butterflies come out and
Yeah.
dragonflies and all sorts of interesting creatures. And that this is quite a scary stat for everybody in the world. I think that it's estimated that 1 in 3 of the mouthfuls of food we eat, and certainly all our products, are pollinated by bees. So if the bees go, the food goes,
Yeah.
because they're
Yeah.
pollinating it all, which is
They are literally the queen
terrifying.
bee, aren't they? They're the top of the tree in many ways, in the order of many things, and not seen that way. So it's a really important message. And yeah, you're right. It's if we don't think about the things, it's not just about vanity. It's not just about how our skin looks. It's not about whether it's about so much bigger, and we're all organs as well. We need to look after ourselves, but we have a responsibility to look after all living organisms so that our own biodiversity works and that of the entire world. So
Absolutely.
it's a really, really brilliant message, but also hugely fascinating subject. I've learned so much, even more now. So thank you so much for coming on and helping to dispel some myths and hopefully get people to go off and have a little look. So if you would link to, if I can get that sheet that
Yeah.
you mentioned, that would be very useful for people, and I can link that in as an attachment, or obviously you can go and contact you via your website. So I think probably the main takeaway would be just to go and look at your products and just
Read
see what's
ingredients.
that first ingredient,
Yeah.
and therefore, now having listened to this conversation, what does that therefore mean that you're buying, and just having a think about it, and thinking about how your skin feels and what's important to you.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And just
Brilliant.
relish in the fact that we're privileged to have got the age we have.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Okay, thank you so much for your time, Julie. Really, really grateful. And yeah, pleasure speaking to you.
Lovely to talk to you too, Wendy. Take care.
I hope you've enjoyed listening, and if you have, you can help by doing 3 things. First, press the follow button to tell podcast platforms you want to listen again. Second, please give the show a 5-star rating and leave a review about why you liked it. And third, I'd love you to share it with friends and family or on your socials, for which I'm truly thankful. Finally, if this podcast is making you want to start reclaiming your own movement, join me in the Reclaim Movement membership for classes, both live and by replay, and countless videos of mini movement breaks to add into your daily life, covering practical and fun, important natural movements. Visit reclaimmovement.co.uk/membership to get started with your 7-day free trial. See you for the next episode, and thank you so much for listening.